something like this over Zoom, so please bear with me. And first of all, just some suggested house rules. I ask if people could mute microphones and have their video on if they feel comfortable with it. I guess that's the best case scenario, is that it's on so we can see each other. I'd ask that people minimize the use of chat, although Etienne's on it, so she will be fielding anything that comes in there. I won't be looking at it. The breakout rooms, I don't want anyone, there'll be a couple of breakout points, and I think we're going to go for about 4 people in each group, and I think it can be a little pressurized in Zoom. I don't want anyone to feel like they either have to join one. I mean, obviously you're strongly encouraged to join, but it's not obligatory, and also don't feel you have to speak or share anything when you're in your breakout room, but again, you're encouraged to. There'll be a couple of opportunities to vote on various things, and I just wanted to say that's all anonymous, so you can say whatever you think and no one can trace it back to you. I might take a few photos or screenshots during it, or Etienne might, and if you don't feel comfortable appearing in a screenshot, then again, maybe just message Etienne in chat privately. Feel very free to eat and drink and move about. There will be a break, but it won't be for a little while. If anyone has anything else, maybe post it in chat at this point, and then you can let me know if anything pops up in chat, because I can't see it while I'm sharing my screen actually. But I will assume that everyone, oh, maybe I can see it. In theory, this will finish at 7:30. I hope to finish at 7:30. Yeah, so I think I will get going. The plan, we're going to have a little introduction and icebreaker, and then talk about some of the preparation we need to do when we're thinking about talking to kids, whether we should actually be talking to kids or not, and then look into some of the general principles of what we might do if we decide we are going to talk. And we're going to look at general principles and then break that down into a few age categories. So I said we're going to do a bit of voting using something called menti.com, which is not something I've used before. So let's hope it works. We'll have a few small breakout sessions, time for questions and comments after each sort of section of the workshop. So I guess hold on, unless anything's really pressing, hold on to your questions, and Etienne will be watching chat. So about me, I work for Low Carbon West Oxford, and it's a community action group that was started in West Oxford after the huge floods in 2007. And I joined in 2016. I'm a climate activist. I guess I became interested in climate change in about 2004, 2005, and have been an activist since, and became a parent in 2010. My particular interest in communicating with kids was really born of the moment when my 10-year-old said that she had been very worried about something that happened at school. She's not great at sharing stuff that she's worried about. She's quite a closed book, but this has obviously really freaked her out. And she said, "Mum, I used too much glue stick at school, and the teacher said that my children are going to die." And this was quite a moment for me, because I guess it flagged up that various things. One, that she was hearing bits and pieces about environmental problems, and she got some sense of cause and effect and behavior and effect. But also it was a really scrambled message. I doubt that the teacher told her that if she used the glue stick, her children would die. But somewhere in that, the exact cause and effect had been lost, and I realised that there was probably a lot of concern happening in her age group without really much access to clear information, and that lots of people might be thinking that if they use too much glue stick, they're killing children. So I brought together a bunch of different groups in the Oxfordshire area who are working on either climate communications or with a particular interest in working with children or communicating with children, and created the Kids Climate Action Network. Now, the aim of this was really to produce information for children which is safe and accurate and empowering, and also to support the adults who are working and living with them, and to avoid duplication between the different groups working in this kind of area, and at the same time maximise our shared impact. So this evening, I want to just share my journey with you so far, some of the interesting information that I've come across. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a child psychologist, but I am very interested, and I have been doing a fair amount of reading around this over the past few years and a fair amount of research. And I'll be drawing on the work of some people like Joe McAndrews and Ray Randall and Caroline Hickman. I'd also really like to draw on the group's wisdom. So if you have ideas during it, if you have sources of information, links, anything like that, then please do go ahead and share those in the chat, and we'll be able to gather those together afterwards. So yes, so the first thing we're going to do is try with menti.com. So if you could, on your computers, go to the website menti.com and enter this code. Oh, sorry, it says that my screen sharing has stopped. That's not what I want to do. Here we go. So you need to enter the code 910204. And you will see a couple of things that you can vote on. Now, it'd be really lovely to see what people have to say about these questions. It should, in theory, as people vote, it should be popping up. I'm just going to check that it's let's see if some results start popping up. Interesting that it hasn't so far. Interesting, okay. So I've made it possible for people to put in multiple answers, partly because if there's several of you watching from one Zoom, then you both might want to answer. So that's partly why. People feeling concerned. I hear that. And like it's necessary and important. Interesting about exciting and relaxed, frustrated. Great. Okay. So yes, it looks like the dominant feeling that has come through on that is concerned, which I can totally understand. The next question, which you should also be able to vote on there, is, do you feel you have the skills and information you need to talk to kids about climate change, or know how or where to get them? So again, if you can interesting. Might just look back and see if anything else had come through on this. Yeah, so certainly that it's necessary, important and concerned. Great, thank you. That's our first experiment with Mentimeter. So it seems like people have a fair amount of the skills. Hopefully tonight, after tonight, you might feel like you have even more. So stage one of talking to kids about climate is not to go and talk to kids about climate, but actually to think about yourself first. So I like to use the analogy, I know it's an airplane based thing, which is not ideal, but to fit your own oxygen mask first. So to deal with some of what's going on for you before you try and relate to others. And there's a few reasons to do that. So when you're calm and grounded, you're actually more able to think clearly, to be creative, and more able to care and connect and communicate well with the children around you. There's also a nice analogy that Jo McAndrews uses in her talk about talking to kids, that kids are actually the Bluetooth speaker to us. So whatever we're feeling, whether we're actually expressing it directly verbally to them, our anxiety about it, they will be picking up on all sorts of cues from us about what we're feeling and amplifying it. But of course, there's time pressure. I'm sure many of us feel this time pressure, and yikes, we've got to talk to kids now. We've got to do something about this now. And Matilda Lacer, a woman I know from a group called Mothers Who Make, has a saying which I like, which is, so much to do, so little time, we must slow down. And I think that's just quite a useful thing to remember when you're thinking about communicating. So the priority really is thinking about your own resilience and your own stress regulation before you even consider broaching the subject with kids. So a couple of things I think are useful. Again, Jo McAndrews has this phrase, fierce protection, or enacting fierce protection. And so what this really means is looking after yourself, thinking about your own emotional well-being, not exposing yourself to information which is distressing, looking after your own energy levels. So there's, as we know, there's a lot of time pressure, there's a lot of stress around it, but it's really important to think about whether you have the energy at this moment in time to go and read the latest research there might be about what the likely impacts of climate change will be, whether you have the energy to go and be part of whatever protest is happening that afternoon, or whether you would actually do better to take some time out and look after yourself. Grounding yourself. So people have different ways of grounding themselves, different things that they do. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's a really useful thing to do, again, before you think about communicating. Gathering the information you need, or at least have in mind some places that you can get the information you need. So Google is a great resource, but I think it can be very useful to have had a bit of a think about what kind of questions you might encounter before you encounter them, so you can go and find the information from reliable resources. So a bit of information gathering. Thinking about who or what supports you. So you may well have heard the phrase that it takes a village to raise a child. Again, the notion of the village as being something very important when you're dealing with topics such as climate change. I think that's just something to actively put in place. So to have people around you that you can call on to support you, whether that's emotionally or with the information, and also be different voices for your children, or for the children around you to have access to. So talking about grounding, you might want to look up body scans. That's something that can be really useful. Things like the horse stance that comes from Qigong, and similar stuff in yoga. Jo McAndrews does something, she's a psychotherapist who used to actually be a celebrant for funerals and run her own funeral service, and she has worked with children around the topic of grief a lot, and has recently turned her expertise to working on climate change, because there's obviously a lot of overlap in what's useful. She talks about how putting your putting your hands on your stomach and your heart, and breathing deeply, how even in something like 12 seconds you're already building new neural connections, and so that actually has a very physical effect that can help you be more prepared for for communicating effectively. So in small groups, Atane's going to help us get into the breakout groups. I would like it if you could say a quick hello to the people in your group. You're very welcome to share how you're feeling, and maybe talk about what support you have, and how you might take steps or a first step to make sure that you have the support and information you need. So we'll allow sort of 8 minutes for that to happen, and then we'll bring the groups back. Okay?
Okay, so hopefully you should all be popped into breakout rooms. You'll get a 60-second warning when the breakout room is about to close. Okay, we'll see you back in a little bit.
Hello. Okay, so welcome back. I hope that was interesting. I'm just trying to find out how to. I hope everyone can see my screen still. Sorry, you've disappeared from. Can I get a nod if you can still see my screen? Yeah, awesome.
You're not on share screen at the moment, Mim.
I'm not. Oh.
Or at least not to me.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Here we go. I should be on share screen now, I hope. So I hope that people found that interesting and useful. Again, we're going to use Menti just to get an idea of what people think is their best source of support. So I will swap over to Menti and you'll be able to see the code again there. So if you head to menti.com again, and the code is 762045-3, and if you can pop in some ideas of what your best source of support is. We had some interesting different things in our group, more body-based practice such as yoga, religious support. For me, I'm actually part of a childcare group called The Village, and I find that is a real source of support. We have a WhatsApp group and we share ideas, we can ask questions for all sorts of things, but including this. Hopefully some responses are going to start popping up soon, so we're not all staring at a blank. Oh, look, Low Carbon West Oxford is a source of support. That's very nice. I suspect that was Kathy. I guessed right. Great. Time to think during lockdown. That's really positive use of lockdown. Rocha UK, I'll have to look that up. Henley Business School. That's interesting, about other parents at school not wanting to talk about the climate crisis. That's something I haven't actually explored in this presentation, but I think that's a really interesting area to look at. I do know some groups of parents who in various primary schools who are actively working together on engaging the school. So I wonder if the person who wrote that is a parent, then maybe looking into that. Well, they are a parent because they said other parents. Yes.
We don't see the Menti screen as it came up the last time, but we see just your slide from the PowerPoint for some reason.
Okay. Okay, let me stop the share and start sharing again. Otherwise, yeah. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so this is the Menti, the Menti screen, which is now doing funny things. So, Parents for Future UK, that's a brilliant group for anyone who's concerned about the climate crisis, and it was born alongside the School Strikes for Future, a group of parents wishing to support the youth, the young people involved in that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, great. I see Caroline Hickman's name mentioned there. She's a brilliant speaker and researcher working at Bath University. I would suggest Googling some of what she does. I will be talking about some of what she does in a moment. So I'm just going to stop sharing that. Thank you for all of those bits. And now I hope that I can share my presentation screen again. So Etienne, please tell me if it's not showing my presentation screen, otherwise I'll assume it is. So the next stage, after thinking through some self-care, how we relate to others. So should we even do it? Now, Ro Randall wrote an article in 2011. She is behind, she's a psychotherapist, again, behind Climate Conversations. And she said, should we even be working with children about climate change? So some of the things, obviously it's really tempting to be talking to kids about climate change because this is an emergency, right? And there's huge urgency, so get everyone involved, let's all do what we can. Why wouldn't you involve kids? Also, I think there can be this idea that if we get them when they're young, then they're more likely to grow up to be climate activists when they're older, when we might feel we have less influence over the direction, the choices they make. Also in 2019, this headline on the right comes from a piece of research that appeared in Nature, which found that children actually have a huge impact on their parents, especially I think they found that teen girls had a significant impact, particularly on conservative fathers, which was very interesting. So you can imagine that if you're a climate activist thinking, how do we get to some of the climate skeptic adults? Well, obviously going through children could be one way of doing that. And the power of the moral message of children, our psychological reaction to them has proved really powerful, as we can see through the school strikes for climate. I think the framing of intergenerational injustice has actually proved more powerful in this country than geographical injustice. So photos in the newspapers of people who are far away, who are suffering, who we've seen suffering in the newspapers for years and years, sadly has less impact perhaps than hearing your own child go, actually this is going to impact my future right here, right now. And so it can be very tempting to think, right, people are listening to the school strikes, we must get all the children doing this to create the change that we want to see. So, however, floppy engagement carries real risks. So it can obviously, as I saw from my 10-year-old, mental distress, worry about what is going to happen, what the future holds if children are not equipped with very clear and empowering information. Then there's and even if they are equipped with the clear information, I think we need to be really careful about it being age appropriate, so we don't cause unnecessary mental distress. Let's not try and pretend that it isn't logical to feel some mental distress about this. A sense of powerlessness in our society. Children, at the end of the day, children are still less powerful than adults in terms of voting power, etc. And I think they can really feel this. A burden. We don't want to be making children, or I think we want to be very careful about making children feel like it's up to them to fix this. There's a difference between creating action in a child through coercion and pressure versus actually empowering them to take the action that they want to take, and that's something we'll think about a little bit more. So I think it's really crucial, first and foremost, to think about what your motivation for speaking to the child in question is. So some stats just to remind us why. Obviously, I think it's a pretty obvious question. Should we be doing it? Well, yes, we need to. And here's some reasons why. We need to do it, and we need to do it well. There's a real lack of it in school. So from 2019, again, 75% of UK teachers feel they haven't received the training they need to talk about climate change. I think the key stat in this from 2018 is that 68% want to learn more, and only 4% feel that they know a lot about climate change. And considering that this is a really massive thing that they'll be hearing about a lot, it makes sense that more of them want to know about it. So it's not happening at school. It's all over the place, especially with, for example, XR. You know, there's posters everywhere. It's been in the news, climate emergency, climate crisis. There's the school strikes. It will very much be in the face of children. To what extent children notice that will obviously vary, but I think we need to prepare as if a child is seeing some of this stuff, because we really want to be providing support for those who are noticing it and feeling worried about it. And they might not tell us that they're feeling worried about it. Kiddie whispers can be really damaging. So as seen with my daughter, when children are not given clear and accurate information, they kind of make up their own truth, whether it's excess glue causing future deaths or whatever. So we really need to be filling that void left by the curriculum, and making sure that they have access to the information they need, and information which empowers them. Eco-anxiety is affecting more and more children. Again, Caroline Hickman came up earlier, so she's done research on that. And they're also asking, so we have a moral responsibility to tell them what's going on, but do it carefully. We need to equip them for the future. So Caroline Hickman says, we need to prepare them for what is coming, and we need to do it thoughtfully, wisely, kindly, and playfully. That is our job. She has an analogy of the flower pot. Now, some gardeners I know have complained to me about this analogy, but I still like it. And so in pot one, you see soft soil, no instructions. So this is the really protected child who hears nothing about the hardships in the world, and they can grow really fast and happily, but then they're not as resilient as a child that knows something. Equally, you don't want to put loads and loads of rocks on top of them and just stop them from flourishing at all. There's a real balance, and I think it may not be horticulturally accurate, but I think it's still a useful thing to bear in mind when talking to a child. So I wanted people just to take a moment to ponder by yourself about your own motivation for talking to kids about climate change, and whether you feel like you've actively considered the difference between burdening or coercing children into action versus empowering and educating when talking to them. So just take 1 minute to have a think about that, and then we will move on. So how we do relate going forwards. We're going to look at some general rules for how we relate, and then break the audience down into some age groups. Now, these age groups are very much guides, because one 11-year-old is not like another 11-year-old. So, you know, it's all with a sort of pinch of salt, and you know, just things to bear in mind for different age groups. So another Menti. I'm not sure, this is the first time I've used Menti, and I'm not sure I'm actually that excited by it, because it seems to be a little slow to respond, but bear with me. Okay, so this is, if you head over to Menti again, this is just to get an idea of what age group people are interested in interacting with. And I realise some people will be working with a range, but you can see the code for menti.com at the top there. So we're weighted towards the younger age groups. Oh. Okay, thank you. That's useful to know. Let me go back to. So, Eten, I hope you see my screen again. If you don't see my slides, please let me know.
Yeah, no, they're there.
Great. So a couple of general ideas about how to engage. We've talked about self first. I think the idea of being age and child appropriate is pretty obvious, but worth really bearing in mind, and aiming to empower rather than exploit. So keeping your motivation for what you're doing in check. Consent. So in an ideal world, I think any conversation about climate change, it's great if you can start with would you be interested in talking about this, rather than forcing a difficult topic on anyone. Obviously this becomes a bit more complex when you're talking about a school context. So I go into schools and talk about climate change. It's hard for me to ask everyone in a class if they mind what I'm going to talk about, but that's just food for thought and to bear in mind, especially when you're one-to-one with kids. Drawing on the village, we've already mentioned. Avoiding scary language and images, obvious, but also be mindful of what is around. So a good example, I think Joe McAndrews spoke about this, about an XR protest, which was incredibly impactful, which was spilling a whole load of what looked like blood outside Downing Street. And so something like that, quite incredible to witness, but worth thinking about whether that's appropriate for a child of whatever age. And I think when you're going to anything, any sort of protests, or even, you know, the school strikes, just being mindful about what sort of things children might be exposed to. Wherever possible, linking to children's everyday and to accessible actions for them. So thinking about what kind of things they can do, what's appropriate for their age. Unfortunately, I can't remember who said this. So if anyone does know who said it, if they can stick it in the chat, that would be useful. But there's no better salve for anxiety than action. And I think that's really true, accessible action. Using the power of stories and nurturing that nature connection. So I will say a bit more about those. So stories, what kind of stories are appropriate? Stories of humans overcoming great challenges. So that doesn't necessarily have to be, obviously, environmental challenges. Stories like Rosa Parks, the ozone hole. I love the story of the ozone hole because it gives me hope. And focusing on inspiring people rather than doom mongering, I think, is important. Using Indigenous stories. Books. I usually in these workshops, I would have a whole load of books for people to browse and have a look at. But so these are just two of my favourites. The Ugly Five, it's not about climate change at all. It's about the intrinsic value of various animals and how they might be ugly, but they have their own worth for their own sakes, which is an interesting idea to explore with a child. Clean Up, a really positive, empowered little girl, makes a big difference to her local area by harnessing the power of her community. So just two examples. Again, if you have some good books that you'd like to share, pop them in chat or email me afterwards. Also, an idea is making children part of the process of the story. So also asking them what a good ending would be, you know, get them to identify favourite characters who overcome the odds. I expect they know stories about people who've done great things. Maybe there's kids at school who have overcome things, you know, things that are close to home. Don't make it all far away. And I guess my one thing with Clean Up is it's on a beautiful little island very far away. So also think about things that are right in your street, very close by. So moving on to one of the age groups, the pre-sevens. Fierce protection, really important with this age group. And in fact, I would skip down to the bold bit there, which is to say, this isn't the time to talk about climate change per se, or to focus on climate change. Of course, if it comes up as words, that's one thing, but it's more about focusing on nature and a love of nature and nurturing that sense of wonder at this stage, and enacting fierce protection. If you're a parent with an under 7, Joe McAndrews draws attention, I think, helpfully to hormones that are at play in parents of young children as well, and just being mindful of your own vulnerability at that stage of life. So enacting particularly fierce protection of yourself. So not exposing the children, your child or the children to unnecessarily unsettling or upsetting things. This is the age where you can start to build the village around you, and also the age where you can really nurture resilience. So that is by giving children the message that you matter and that you're safe, you're heard. You can start to build relevant skills, so the idea of consent, empathy skills, etc. And leading by example and verbalizing, I think that's really important. We talk about, I'm going to put this in the compost bin because blah, blah, blah. Starting small, so just looking at the stuff that's around you, spend some time looking at a worm, make a rainbow using a spray bottle, you know, really nurturing that sense of wonder. There's a quote here: you won't protect what you don't love, and you can't love what you don't know. And I think that's David Attenborough. In fact, yes. So no one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about what they have never experienced. So a slight tweak of that, but I think that's a really important thing. So really nurturing that nature connection. There's a brilliant book by Rachel Carson. I absolutely love it. You can actually download it online, I found today, but I thought I wouldn't share the link because I wasn't sure how appropriate that was. But it's also a beautiful book. I have that version there, which has the photographs. And this is a book that Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, wrote about experiencing the sense of wonder and nurturing the sense of wonder in her young nephew as she looked at puddles and the world around her, and how it renewed her delight as well. And I think it's a really great book to read for any parent or anyone working with kids at whatever stage. And having fun, the last thing I included there. If you haven't come across the Formidable Vegetable Sound System, I recommend that. They're an Australian band who have some great songs about climate change, specifically designed for young children. We absolutely love dancing around, stuff like that. Of course, in Oxford, there's also Nick Cope, who's done a couple of climate themed or environmentally focused songs, and yeah, the more that you can have fun and enjoy music together and just make it part of stories and music and the everyday, the better at this age. So if I wanted to see if there are any ideas and questions at this point. I think I might need to stop my screen share so that I can see if there's anything in chat, if anyone has any ideas or questions. Feel free to put your virtual hand up or put a question in the chat or any ideas.
There are no outstanding questions from earlier on.
Okay.
So you don't have to go scrolling up.
Yeah, okay. Doesn't look like, is anyone typing? Don't think so. No, okay. So if there are questions, I will try and respond to those afterwards. So let me see if I can get back to, oh, books, some great book ideas coming in. So yeah, so now we come to the second group, the 7 to 14-year-olds. Obviously, it's a pretty wide group, and I think it could, yeah, obviously you could break it down into Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, but there's a fair amount of crossover. So again, keeping that fierce protection going. So thinking about what information is necessary versus what is not really necessary, even if it's relevant. Thinking about protests that kids go to, what they might see at something like that. I think the key message in the 7 to 14-year group is that adults are working on it. So it's not up to this age group to sort it out. It's not up to them to sort it out. There are lots of adults who are working on it. Jo McAndrews in her workshop said the adults have got this, but I disagreed with that, and because I wouldn't say it's entirely true to say that the adults have got this. I think unfortunately that's putting a gloss on it, which I feel is not appropriate. So I prefer to say that the adults are working on it, and to give examples of adults who are working on it. But then if you want to help, you know, here are some ways that you can. So support and facilitate them to get involved. So think about child-friendly, accessible things that they can do, and also find out what they want to do. Now, kids of this age, there is this idea of them having a bit of a superpower. When I go into schools, when I first started going into schools, I thought, well, they do have this superpower of if they write to so-and-so, they're much more likely to be listened to than me. If someone gets a nice letter from a small child with a really moving picture in it, they're much more likely to pay attention. So in some ways they do have a certain power, but I think it's important to make sure that if they are going to write to someone about some aspect of climate change or something that they feel needs to change, that it comes from them, so that they are aware that they can write to people and let people know that they care about things, and but that they don't have to. It's not kind of up to them to do that. I think leading by example, continuing to do that, so in everyday life, and again making sure that you verbalize why you do what you do, so not just assuming that they understand that your way of doing things is just the way to do things, but exploring it a bit with them and opening conversations with questions. So trying to find out what they already know and building on that, rather than assuming they know things or assuming they don't know things, you know, either of those things. Breaking it down into small parts, and so for example, holding up a plant, some leaves, and breathing on it and starting to talk about the cycle that goes on there, or the carbon bathtub, which is worth a Google if you haven't heard of it. This is another example from that I like, which I've used in schools, about the difference between weather and climate. So just starting to break down some of these ideas that might be confusing and finding ways to explain them in a playful way. So I think at this stage, what time is it? Okay, we've got about half an hour left. If people want to take a break now, my thought is that we'll take a break and you can stretch your legs. So turn your cameras and mics off, and then we'll take 5 minutes, and then we'll please try and come back on time. Before we do that, so after the break, I'll introduce you to some materials I've put together with colleagues for the 7 to 14 age group, and then we'll look at 14 plus and some closing thoughts with one more go on that fabulous Menti. Before we go to break, I'm just going to stop this share, and I wondered if people were happy for me to just do a quick screenshot, if people are happy to put on their video briefly and just do a wave, so that I have just have one photo of, I'm just waiting for everyone. I'll tell you when to wave. People are just turning on their videos, and then so anyone who's happy is appearing bit by bit. Great. And then if you could just do a wave. And thank you. That's great. Great. I will see you all in 5 minutes. Yeah, I just wanted to introduce you, since we're talking about 7 to 14-year-olds, to a set of materials that I've produced in partnership with Eleanor from Rose Hill and Ifley Low Carbon, for use in schools, or actually, I mean, it is for use with children of this age. It doesn't have to be in schools at all, but we've made them so that they are curriculum compliant, so they can fit in easily to a school setting. But they're also perfectly fine to use at home or to use in other settings, such as you know, brownies or whatever. And they're all freely downloadable from the Kids Can website. I will share that link with you. So it's three materials. So the first is the climate challenge, which you can see at the bottom, in the bottom photo there, which is based on the 6 things we can all start doing about climate change today, which Low Carbon West Oxford produced for grown-ups in response to the last IPCC report. But this has been modified to be appropriate and empowering for children, so it's all accessible actions. And then there's a climate change fact buster, which has been checked over recently and tweaked by a scientist to make sure that that is appropriate and that that's all factually correct. And you can see in that picture there, it's only small in that picture, but the carbon bathtub is mentioned in that. So you can check that out in that fact buster. And in addition, we've produced a revision workbook, which is a 13-page workbook, which is for SATs revision for literacy. So it's actually something that teachers could really easily use in the classroom for SATs revision year 6 students. And it's called Climate Change and What to Do About It. So as I said, they're all open source, freely downloadable from our website. So far, we've had coming up to 500 downloads, I think it is now. And to go with them, we've developed a bunch of lesson plans and PowerPoints, which are also downloadable to be used in schools, and an assembly as well. I mentioned empowering versus putting too much pressure on earlier, and I thought I'd show you how I actually tweaked this, the climate challenge booklet, the first one I did. On the left hand side, that's the first version of it, and you can see where the arrow is. It says you can persuade them to make these changes too, and I actually felt that that put too much pressure, and that should be tweaked to put less of a burden of action on these kids. So it now says maybe they'll want to make some changes too. Another example, on the back of the climate challenge workbook, there is a set of actions that they can try at home. So normally in the school session, I suggest they have a little bit of a chat with a partner in the classroom about what they might try out. Again, on the left hand side, that was the first version, and then on the right hand side, you can see I've added in, here are some things you might like to try, again to take a bit of pressure off, and then a little blue bubble which says don't worry if you didn't, where it says did you manage. We can't do everything and you can always try again. So very much trying to make things a bit more gentle, and I think that's really important to remember with this group, this age group, because it's great to give them all sorts of ideas of stuff they can do, but what we don't want is a kid to look at something like this and go home feeling incredibly stressed about what they need to do, or indeed having arguments at home about, well, they said at school that I have to cycle. Well, maybe we sometimes do want kids to have those arguments, but I think we want to enable them to have those arguments because they want to, rather than them feeling like they have to go home and do that. Yeah, that's just hopefully a concrete example of where their emotional well-being is taken into account when producing materials. This is the workbook I mentioned for Key Stage 2 SATs, and I am hoping that I'm about to get a piece of funding that will allow me to put a lot more time into getting these materials out to schools across Oxfordshire. But if you are interested in using them with your local schools, or know of any schools or extracurricular activity groups like Woodcraft Folk, whatever, who might be interested in using them, then please give them the link. So they're all on this website, which is, I will send this afterwards, so don't worry, you don't have to write it all down now, but kidsclimateaction.org. And on there's a blog with bits and pieces that I pick up locally, relevant stuff for parents and teachers and anyone who's interacting with kids or interested in this area. And then you can also download the resources as I've explained. Also, our climate challenge leaflet was the inspiration for a book that was published in spring 2020. It would have been headline news, but unfortunately coronavirus got in the way, so it's appeared quietly, but it's just quite a fun book that's based on our 6 things that you can do for, again, the sort of 7 to 11 age group, I'd say. Also, kids can run workshops. This is just a selection of some that we ran over the last year before COVID came along. So the kind of workshops that we're doing tonight, but also stuff specifically for teachers. We've had Jo McAndrews come along from Stroud a couple of times. She's a brilliant speaker. And then also visits into schools. Again, we're hoping that funding will make it more possible for us to go into more schools, but what we're particularly keen on is other people using our resources, and because, you know, I'm one person at Low Carbon West Oxford and we're a limited team, I should say one paid member of staff, that I've got a whole community behind me, but in terms of being able to deliver workshops and circulate these materials to schools, I'm really keen for others to help whenever possible. So if I can stop sharing my screen and see again if there are any questions, or if anyone has ideas or thoughts about stuff they've found works particularly well with this age group.
Just to go back for a moment to the previous age group, there was one question about the resources you had on one of the slides. Sorry, there was the carbon bathtub and breathing on a leaf, and there was something else after that.
Was it the climate versus weather? Let me just have, sorry, let me have a look what it was. It was just climate versus weather, and using, specifically breaking it down and using their language. So the starting to explore different things like the carbon cycle, so breathing on a leaf and talking a bit about that, and then the carbon bathtub, which I can,
thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, Emma. I think Emma has a question or a thought.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm a new mum, and my kids only just started school, but I got really excited when you were showing us all that kids can paperwork and, you know, the activities and things. And I just wondered, like, what is the way into one school? Like, how do you as a parent, like, how do you persuade the school that, like, just what's the sort of, you know, who do you target?
Yeah, okay. So I think we're actually going to do another sort of panel discussion specifically about that in the near future with CAG, I hope. Aten and I were discussing that before this session. From my experience, it's really about finding the interested individual. So a certain amount of that is really about getting to know the school and getting to know the individual teachers within that. I wouldn't say that there is necessarily another guaranteed way to do it. I don't find a blanket approach of contact the head or whoever is really useful. I am starting to get together a kind of database of the interested individuals that exist within each school. I think each school has at least one or two. But yeah, I would suggest talking to other parents at the school and just trying to build up that network. And it might not be, in some schools it might be immediately obvious, in others it won't. And Bobby Hughes, did you put up your hand? Yeah, did you?
I did. Hello.
Hi.
I was just going to say that I oversee the Devon's Waste Education Programme. I'm not a teacher, but I have teaching staff who go into schools. And I just want to second really what you said. You've got to get involved in your school, because I'm also a parent, so I've seen it from the inside out. My children just left primary school. And if you're working with your local school, get to know them, get involved in the PTA, talk to the head teacher, you know, talk to the teacher who runs the garden club or whatever they might have as an equivalent, you know. And you're quite right, there will be one well, hopefully more than one, but there's sometimes one teacher who's very keen, but they're also often overwhelmed and overworked. So you've got to help them, not just put more pressure on them, because they are carrying so much, and they're trying to change the school from the inside out, and they need help to do that. So parents can help a lot with that. So yeah, I just, you know, get involved. So.
Yeah, and Vicky said that schools love volunteers with key skills, and I think again, yeah, that's really true. The more that you can offer the school, the more in you can get and find out who's who within that ecosystem. But also, yeah, as I said, I'm waiting to hear about a piece of funding which I hope will give me more time to actually build up specific contact across schools in Oxfordshire. So to some extent, there might be a resource that kids can offer where you can actually say, I want to engage someone in our school, who should that be? Any other ideas about the 7 to 14-year-olds? Anyone want to share something that's worked particularly well for them? Or
I think possibly with schools, I'm not directly answering your question, sorry, but it is linked to schools. And I just think, so I do similar work. I go into schools and do environmental climate change work, and I think some of the schools that are already doing a lot of outdoor learning are more open to also including more environmental and sustainability and climate change work. So, so if your school is quite good with the outdoor learning, that's quite a good inroad, because that teacher who is involved with that might also be more open to it. There's some great stuff going on in schools in London. There's a very, very active network of environmental educators in London as well.
Great, thank you. One thing, actually, just from our school, which is Larkrise, so I actually live in Florence Park, not in West Oxford, even though I work over there. And our school has, through the COVID fund, has got match funding to create an outdoor classroom. So very much underneath the, you know, using the co-benefit of needing to provide additional space for kids for them to be taught in a COVID safe way. They, a group of parents have got together on WhatsApp and put together this application for funding, and already raised huge amounts in a week towards buying a big structure to create an outdoor classroom. So I think there's also opportunities to be jumped on in that kind of situation as well. And I'll share some information about that when I send out details after this. Joe makes the point that the interested individual in any school might be a governor, and I think that's really worth remembering as well. And St. Peter's, a link from Bobby, which we can look at after this. I'm aware that we've got roughly 8 more minutes to finish off this, and I haven't said anything about the oldest age group. So let me just go back to my slides briefly. Now, I'm certainly not an expert on this age group. Not that I'm an expert necessarily on the other age groups, but at least I'm kind of in dealing with children in those areas, those age groups on a day-to-day basis at the moment. But the 14+ group, so a few ideas from me. Fears protection, so looking for anxiety and teaching self-care, I think really important at this age. So anxiety might not be as obvious as it could be with younger groups. It might not get verbalized as much, but it's really important to look out for it and to try and nurture connection between you and individuals of this kind of age group. The village should ideally, this is what I'm hoping anyway, the village should come into its own for the teen years. In the case of, if we're talking about a parent-child relationship, there's a certain amount of rejection potentially in the teenage years, where if you've got a good village around you of other adults that a child can turn to, that can be particularly useful for teens, I think. Help them to find what their contribution is and help them to get the information they need to take action safely. So facilitate what they want to do and try and find out what they want to do. I think there's a lot of kids as well who are really keen to, you know, as we've seen from the school strikes and from XR Youth, lots of kids who are very keen to get involved and take action. It's really important to enable and also to keep an eye on safety and pressure and mental health at this age. Ongoing support to develop critical thinking, so discussing what you see on the media, you know, just as part of everyday conversations. And, you know, there's not been much about climate recently in the media. Why do you think that might be? You know, just exploring some of these questions with them. And be aware that this age group is more able to conceptualize what might happen in this world as a result of climate change, and what is likely to happen. You know, they are more likely to understand what human extinction might mean than a young child. So just be aware of that burden. And playfulness. Someone pointed this out in one of my workshops, and I do think that's really important. to just remember that has a role in interaction with kids of all sorts of ages, and shouldn't be forgotten when someone's a sulky teen. Someone who in Oxford who has a lot more experience of working specifically with teens is Dr. Kim Polgreen. She's a member of Kids Climate Action Network, and she runs the Oxford Climate Club, and at the moment it's not what it was, as in there's no meeting up and hanging out and chatting, but what she is doing is career chats with sustainability professionals online. So there's a screenshot of an Eventbrite session, and she's got a new website which is climatevillage.org, which I suggest you check out if you're interested in teenage years. It's got information on there about the climate clubs. It's got a lot about what work she's putting in to provide insight into environmental careers for kids of this age group. I think she's also the youth engagement lead at Whiteham, the visiting youth engagement lead at Whiteham Woods at the moment. But yeah, she's really great. I would check her out. So any ideas or questions for this age group, for the 14 plus? Did I see a wave? No. No. Okay. I'm aware we have 4 more minutes, so I'm just gonna. Oh, there was a question. I'll have a look at the end, sorry. So I just wanted to spend the last few minutes thinking about opportunities that you might have in your lives for engaging young people. Some of you have you know, things in place already which are really obvious. So if you're a forest school lead or a teacher or whatever, it's just worth thinking about what formal or semi-formal settings you might be able to engage with young people on this topic, and also considering some of the informal ones. So in small groups, this is our last breakout, which will just be a couple of minutes, and I promise we won't run too much over time. So Etienne, if you're happy to put people into groups, I just wanted you to have a quick chat about ideas, your opportunities for engagement, and what your next step will be in terms of looking to actively engage young people about climate change.
Okay, I'll just put you all into rooms now.
Okay, thank you.
How many minutes would you like, Mim?
I think only a few minutes, because I'm aware that so maybe 4 minutes, so that people have a few,
okay.
You know, a minute each.
And again, you'll get a warning when it's 60 seconds to go. Mim, you're on mute.
Unmute myself. Okay. So the last 2 questions, we're going to go back into Menti and just look at these last 2 questions before a few closing points. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so what next step? So the code for Menti this time is 2864250, and the questions are: what next step will you take to engage? And then we're going back to: do you feel you have the skills, information, or know how and where to get them again? So if you want to just take a moment. think everyone's typing away. Oh, a school session this Friday with years 5 and 6. Great. Yoga, kids yoga with a climate change theme. I would love to hear about that. I like the think more deeply about the negatives. I feel like that's a really important part of the process, that it can be very easy to overlook. So thinking about what you need to avoid when you're talking to kids. So not rushing in to do it without thinking about some of the potential harm. Okay, so, and then the next one, I expect this has been to whistle stop. They really have much impact on the responses to this question, but let's see if you want to fill this, answer the second question quickly. Ooh, I think we might have shifted over to the right. Well, keep voting on there. I'm not going to spend any more time watching it, but your vote still counts. So just to take you back, I want to just take you back to the closing disclaimer so I can let you get on with your evenings and I can do bedtime. I've actually had to lock my back door and come down to the shed to avoid the screaming for mummy tonight. So I'm really looking forward to going back in. So my closing disclaimer, a couple of things I think it's just worth remembering. The first is it's okay to get it wrong. So hooray for neuroplasticity. You know, kids can deal with a lot of difficult things, and I think, you know, it might be that tonight has brought up moments where you think, oh, actually I shouldn't have said that, or maybe that caused more upset than it needed to, and I guess, you know, having some compassion for yourself in terms of trying to do your best, and you know, this is really a learning process. Google is your friend, as I said. Go online, check out some sites, find some materials in advance, find some age group friendly websites to look at. Again, if you have any really good ones you know about, please put them in the chat so we can share them, so that when questions do come up, you know where to look. Parenting here, I use that in the widest sense. So looking after children as activism in itself. So you know, it doesn't all have to be about climate change activism specifically. Good parenting and good empowerment of the young people of today is really important activism for our future, bringing up resilient and empowered individuals with some sort of social conscience. Remember the village, draw on that village, draw on your network, and don't go it alone, and look for people to talk to, and look after yourself. Show them what it means to look after yourself, because that in itself is a radical act. Sadly, looking after yourself is a radical act. One quick thing to mention is my friend Joe, who is a brilliant researcher who's just done a PhD looking at the emotions around climate change. She is going to be offering a series of workshops for dealing with emotions. So the work that reconnects, which some of you might have heard of, which is something created by Joanna Macy. She's going to be running a workshop specifically for adults who are working with children on climate change, which is a real opportunity to explore and process some of the emotions that come up through this sort of work. So I'll send out some details about that, but if you are interested in that, again, pop it in the chat, and I can let you know more. next steps, help us get the Kids Can materials out there. So any school contacts you have, or any good, you know, if you're interested in delivering assemblies or circulating materials at all, that's brilliant. If you have any feedback, constructive criticism, we're really keen to hear that as well. I'm always keen to see other people's resources. Someone in my little chat group now just mentioned that they had created a pack for over the summer. I'd love links to stuff like that. I'm really keen to share stuff that exists and has been created by other people as well. If you want to hear more from me, as I said, I work for Low Carbon West Oxford, and we have a monthly-ish newsletter which you can sign up to via our website. And yeah, thank you, and thank you to CAG as well and Aten for hosting. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now in case there are any questions. Did anyone have any specific questions? Great, there's some links being shared, thank you.
Yeah, there's lots of links in the chat, so I'm going to save the chat, and I'll also make a document and put those links in it, and hopefully you can have an explore of those. I know several people had to leave because they had other meetings or things on, but if any of you want to stay in touch, we can share details through CAG. If you found somebody in one of the chat rooms that was particularly, you know, interested in something you were interested in and you'd like to get contact details, we can share them that way.
And also what I'll do, normally, as I said, I would have loads of books for people to look through, loads of articles and links. Oh yes, thanks for sharing the Climate Psychology Alliance link, Bobby. And I will put all of these things into a document and send around the book lists of stuff that I particularly like, stuff like The Sense of Wonder, other websites I know about. Yeah, and keep sharing your ideas and be in touch.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. It's been really, really interesting, Mim. Huge thanks to you for hosting it. I think we've all definitely learnt a lot, and also loads of food for thought and ideas for taking things forward. So thank you all for that. Look forward to hearing from you all in different guises, and hopefully we'll get this panel on talking to your school about getting engaged with climate change off the ground fairly soon, and we will let you know all about that. Great. Thank you all so much. Have a lovely evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, well done. That was fantastic.
Okay. It's really weird sitting staring at a screen. It's quite disconcerting when you can't see humans reacting right in front of you. But anyway.
Yeah, no, and you get no feedback whatsoever, whether things are just falling flat or.
Well, at first I had the faces. I had some faces on the side, but because people are looking at screens, they're all just kind of going like that, and I found it really, really unsettling to have these sort of screen
No, there were
faces.
loads of positive comments in the chat of people saying this is fantastic and so inspiring and things like that. So I think it's gone down really well.
Good. Okay.
So great.
Okay.
So yeah, so I will take all of these links out of the chat.
Thank you.
And make a document. There was one question from somebody else to say, yes, were any of the Joe McAndrews talks online?
Yes.
Some of you asked privately, so I didn't want to put it to the whole group just in case for some reason why they didn't want to.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I will. So I have this sheet of things I would normally share after this workshop, so I can, if you want to send me the links from the chat, then I could sort of incorporate it into that document and send it back to you.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
And then that will include links to Joe McAndrews, and
great stuff.
Cool.
Oh, well, thank you so very much.
Okay. Better go and do bedtime.
Exactly. I know. People are banging
on by the door.
Are you finished yet? No.
Last time I had one of them come in and start breastfeeding. It was just, I was like, this time I'm locking it. I'm not having it. Right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a lovely evening. Bye.
Yeah, bye. Bye.